Next step is coloring our city, so this will be quite interesting. So let's open up a secondary window in Blender, and this will be our render, our full render. This will be basically our camera view. So for the ISO cam, let's see what camera works the best. So this is the ISO cam 4 to 3 cam. This doesn't work the best in my favor. Let's try the ground plane and let's try true ISO cam. True ISO cam and game ISO cam tend to look the best, to be honest. So it's either going to be true ISO cam or game ISO cam. And I think they both look good, but I probably want to go with game ISO cam. Okay, so let's delete true ISO cam. Just press an X and delete. Now we've got game ISO cam. So now we can actually adjust this in any way we'd like. So if we go to camera on the right side, we will essentially be able to just adjust this as much as we'd like. So in our camera setting on the right, we can just adjust our camera as much as we'd like. And I'm just adjusting the Y scaling and the X scaling as well, and basically trying to get this to be centered as much as possible. So that's looking better. So on the right hand side, we need to create a new plane, actually a new plane for our design. So let's create a plane, Shift A, and let's create a plane, and we would like to scale this up on 15, and we can scale it a bit more as long as it's not within our camera view. Then that's great. So this is the back of the vehicle for one, but let's add a couple more details that would be really fantastic. So for one, rear lighting for our vehicle. So let's add a cube and let's scale this cube down. And let's scale it along the x-axis, and let's reduce the size along the y-axis, and let's duplicate and bring it across on the x-axis to the opposite side. Now we can do the same with the opposite car. So duplicate these, carry it along the x-axis, and we're going to need to bring it backwards. Right now it just looks like two bricks, but yeah, let's carry it backwards down there and forwards a little bit so it protrudes out of our vehicle, and probably bring it down a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Let's save our document and let's duplicate and let's bring this towards the back, and let's add this to our vehicle that is entering the parking lot. So let's rotate this and let's bring this down on the x-axis, and let's bring it across on the y-axis. Let's scale it down on the y-axis. Let's bring it down on the x-axis as well. So now we would like to render our application, and of course we are going to render it in cycles, and of course we're using our GPU compute. We would like to denoise, and our final render will probably be around 7,000. To be honest, we want this to be quite crisp. One thing that I almost forgot was to put some markings in the road. So let's click right there and let's add a plane. So that's pretty good right there. Let's scale it down and let's scale this along the, I think along the y-axis. Scale it down a little bit more on the x-axis. There we go. And now we can just add an array of these along. But before we do that, let's just duplicate. So duplicate, add this over there. And the one in the middle is the one that we would like to, we're going to add an array in our modifier. Let's go to array. So let's edit our array, set the factor x to 0, and let's set the distance apart to 1.2, and let's increase the counts. So 11 counts seems to be perfect. And I think it's a little bit too skinny, so let's just scale this along the x-axis. Now additionally, we want to click into edit mode, and we would like to extrude just a little bit. We don't want it to be too extruded. We literally want it to be extruded by the smallest margin, so there's like something there that we know. And let's rotate the one on the right. Let's rotate this by 90 degrees. Bring it down along the y-axis. Bring it down along the y-axis and scale it on the x-axis. Actually, scale it fully on the x-axis. almost fully and move it within our border. There we go. Move it up just a little bit and move it across on the left hand side. And let's scale this down on the x-axis quite a bit. And let's move this along the x-axis. Let's set the factor x to 0 and the y to 1.3, and let's add five different counts. And let's tab in, and typically we just want to extrude by the smallest margins, and we do that with the same thing on the right hand side. Extrude by adding literally with the smallest margins. There we go. That tends to look pretty good. Now there's one thing, we can actually adjust the vehicle right there, and let's just move it towards the right hand side. And the other vehicle, we can actually move this one towards the right hand side as well, using the x-axis, of course. So everything looks like it's being properly coordinated. Now the question is, should we add stoplights? Am I right? Probably not at the moment. I think it's okay at the moment. So let's just start to color our design. So everything is low poly, of course. I think with the background we'll probably use a blue design. So let's go to our coloring section and let's call this blue, or blue number 1, and let's add a bluish, like a bright blue color, and let's see what that can get us. We also need to add lighting to our scene. That's quite essential. And if you're familiar with how I work, you'll know how we add lighting. We like to add our lightings in a sort of grid. So first area lighting right there, and let's move this upwards, and let's expand this area light, and let's increase it to roughly around 6,000, I'd say. So on our left hand side of our screen, we can now go to render, and we should have something looking like that. That actually looks pretty good. We got our trees, we got a lot of stuff. We got shadows, and I think shadows are an important part for our design. So that is pretty good. Since we've got an area light right there, we would like to duplicate and possibly add another area light. There we go. So now we've got 2 area lights, and it's looking like the sun is coming from the right hand side, well, the left hand side actually. With those 2 area light, move them towards the left hand side a little bit more, GY, and let's move them across a little bit more. That actually looks really interesting, I'd say. Really interesting. And we can probably turn these down to around 4,000. Try not to get it too bright, but from now on we can continue designing our building. Now some of these designs we also need to add glass. We need to separate quite a few things. So this, for one, we need to duplicate, and let's bring this outwards just a little, and this will be a glass that's also separated. We also need to separate this door right there, and on the side panels we need to duplicate once again and separate, of course. Duplicate this area once more, bring it out on the y-axis. Actually, I don't think that's necessary because that is basically a door. Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. So let's move on to our house right here, and it's the same thing with this design. Duplicate, bring this one forward somewhat and separate. And with the windows at the top, it's essentially the same thing. Duplicate, bringing them forward on the x-axis, and of course separate. So duplicate, bring it forward and separate. So that's looking good. Windows are separated right there. With our ATM machine, some things can be separated as well. So inside the ATM machine, like right there, that needs to be separated. We can add a light unit right there. This also needs to be separated because that's the screen. So I would say that's pretty good. So those parts are separated. And now with our building, we can now tab into our building, and with these ones it's the same thing. Duplicate, bring these forward along the x-axis and separate these. Yeah, that's perfect. Tab into the building once more, duplicate, bring these forward, and of course separate. There we go. Let's save our documents. Let's duplicate this and let's bring it forward along the y-axis and separate, because these will be our glass panels. And quite a similar thing with the cars, I think. These can be separated by material, I believe. Now let's continue coloring our surfaces. Before we separate these by material, let's just continue designing our building. Now, as for the plane, I think the plane can be brought up just a little bit. That's about right. That looks pretty good. For the tiles, it can be light gray, so let's call this gray 1. And this is literally just white, but it's a little bit darker. And the same thing with the pavement. Can call this gray 2. That's just a little bit white, but not as dark as the tiles. So all the tiles, we can just call them gray 1. And for the tarmac, actually, this can be black, and we just need to put this in a darker color. That's pretty good. Now, because it's a tarmac, it can be a little bit glossy, but it is not metallic at all. And we can probably increase the roughness of course, because it is a road surface. So that's pretty good. So roughness is quite high, just around 70, I would say. And the spectacle is all the way down to around 55. And as for the pavements, this can be green, because it's kind of like grass. That's actually a really nice green. Yep, that is actually a really, really nice green. Now, as for our tree, this can be green too. It's a little bit darker kind of green. Now, green 3 for our leaves. Some of these can be darker, but some of them can also be lighter green. So now I'm just changing all the colors of the leaves to green 3. And this is just to make sure that everything does match and is cohesive. And now with the second tree, we can actually do the opposite. We can make the leaves a little bit lighter, like green 2. And we're going to do the same thing with all of our trees. So I'm going to skip ahead, and you can just color all of your trees. So everything is looking good so far. So let's continue. I think we'd like to move this along a little bit. So let's select this and let's move it down a little bit, because right now it's kind of in the path of our vehicle. So I think that does look a little bit better. Now, as for our vehicle, our first vehicle, I'm thinking we might go with something like orange. So orange 1, new color, probably a dark reddish orange, perhaps something like that. And obviously the lights at the back, I do want those lights to be emissions. So red emissions. So if we go into the emissions tab, we'll be able to change these lights to red. I'll be able to turn up the emissions, and doesn't look the best, unfortunately. Or perhaps we need to make it a little bit darker, perhaps like that. And of course our side panels, orange 1, and our tires, of course, we can probably put black 2, new materials, because we want this to be a little bit rubbery, because for the most part it is rubber. So turn down the roughness naturally. I'd say keep the roughness around 350. That tends to look quite interesting. And change this part to black 2 as well. There we go. This panel should be orange 1 as well. And on the other side, we just need to fill in all of our colors as well. So such as this panel, orange 1 once again, and black 2. So now let's scale this along the x-axis, And now we can separate this by material, of course. And let's add a new material and let's assign this new material, and we will call this glass, or at least glass 1, I should think. And if we go into surface, we can then choose glass material. And I think we'd like to make this glass a little bit dark. Yeah, kind of like that, I think. I think that looks pretty good. And it's the same for these ones. Separate material. So let's go back in, and this we can separate material as well. So if we separate material, we should be able to add glass 1, and let's assign. Okay, there we go. So it's the same thing with this side, separate by material. And it's the same thing, new material. Let's click on glass 1 and assign. And there we go. We're getting an interior look of the vehicle. But I do wonder if this glass is perhaps a little bit too much information. So now front panel, we can extend this a little bit and obviously separate this material. It's the same thing, separate material. And let's click the plus sign and let's create a new one in cloud. We will call this glass 2. Let's click assign and let's go to surface and let's go to glass, and this glass will be quite see-through. So on the other car, this will be a lot more apparent, but on this car, obviously we can't see it. So that car is almost done. I'd say it's almost finished. I think the orange color needs to be adjusted. Maybe a yellow. Yeah, perhaps a yellow car like that. That's better, in my opinion. That's better for now. Now the second car, what color can we give this one? Perhaps a blue car, or perhaps gray. I'm not too sure, but let's see if we can find a color that suits this car. Actually, this purplish color is actually really nice. I think we can do that. And let's click on these panels and we will do the same thing. Purple 1 for these panels. And it's the same thing with the tires as well. Let's fill the panels with purple 1. And obviously you can change the colors to something that you will like. You might not like the colors that I'm choosing, so you can always change the colors to something that you will like. As for the tires, I do believe that was black 2, and that's also because it makes it look really metallic, which is really quite nice. So that's kind of cool. And for the front lights, we want our lights to be white, so let's put white 1. And let's change the surface to emission and essentially turn up these emissions. Look at that. That looks pretty fascinating. As for these tires as well, let's change these tires. You don't have to, because if the camera is not seeing it, you don't really have to. But you can, to make sure that your design is 100% accurate. And obviously this is a design that you can explore. Save your file. It's a design that I'd like you to explore and to experiment, to find something that you like for yourself. So let's tab into our car and let's scale the front screen on the x-axis, and let's separate by material, and let's click the plus button and let's assign a new material. Actually, what we could do is use the same material we were using for the other car, and I do believe that was probably glass 2. It's hard to say what would look nice with glass 2, to be honest. Perhaps more of a dark bluish kind of color. That kind of looks crazy. So let's make it a bit lighter. That still looks crazy. Let's do it. Let's go with dark, but let's perhaps make it even darker. Yeah, perhaps make it even darker. So what we can actually do is just go with glass 1, because I think glass 1 was almost perfect. Yeah, I think glass 1 is pretty safe for us. So let's assign glass 2 to the other panels, and at the back as well, let's assign glass 1 there as well. And on the side, let's assign glass 1. There we go. And let's save our file. So let's go into object mode and let's go to the next cars. So this one, that's going into the driveway. So for this car, we can actually go with an old kind of green. Maybe green 5. I think like an old kind of green, like an almost like an army kind of green. It'll be hard to find the kind of green that I'm thinking of. It's hard to say. It's hard to find a color, but I'm not doing so well with green, unfortunately. Perhaps red. Perhaps that red. That actually looks really nice. So let's change this to red. Red 3. And as for these panels, let's get these panels changed as well to red 3. And let's change the tires to black 2 as well. Obviously this is all low poly stuff, which is really nice. Working with low poly stuff is really nice because it can be quite simplistic. And because these are the backlights, we want red emissions for both of our lights. Red emissions for both. And of course, for our tires on this side as well, we want to go with black 2. It's a glossy kind of black, supposed to look like a tire. So I guess that's what we're working with. So let's see what we can do. So let's create a new one, let's click plus and let's go with glass 1 and let's assign. There we go. And it's the same thing. Let's assign this to our other glass 1 once again and assign. This way it makes everything easy actually. And on the side as well, yes, assign that one as well. And by the way, for this box, we can perhaps put that one in gray 1 as well. And the one up here as well, we can perhaps put that one in gray 1 as well. And as for this car right here, I have no idea what we're going to set this color to, but should be quite good. So new color, new material, and let's see what works. So that's interesting. That's an interesting green. That's a really interesting green. I think we can work with that. So let's name this green 6 and let's fill in these gaps right there. So just go around and fill in all of your gaps so they do look nice. And of course your tires, your tires need to be black 2. There we go. Our materials that we already used, we're just re-implementing them. And then we can tab into our vehicle and now we can edit these screens. We can edit the windows. So there we go, glass 1 right there. And at the front, same thing, assign glass 1. And at the rear, it's the same thing, glass 1, assign that. And on the right hand side, it's glass 1 and assign. Save that because it's looking fantastic and we don't really want to lose that, do we? You know, there is one thing that I completely forgot in this design, but we can add it quite simple. That is a light pole. So let's duplicate this pole over there and let's take it out onto the main road and let's bring it downwards a little bit and let's scale it down somewhat. And at the top right there, shift right click, let's add our cursor and let's add a little box, a little cube right there, a little cube. And with this we can actually expand our design and expand it along. There we go. It's literally just a simple design. Now you want to tab into this and with the bottom plane we can delete X to delete face and then tab out, and now we can add Shift A. Let's add a light unit in there, and I think an area light will be worth it. There we go. So from top down view, let's click 7 on our number pad for top down view and let's scale this area light along the x-axis kind of like that and scale it along the y-axis kind of like that. There we go. And now we can increase the power. Can probably increase it to 500. I think 500 looks pretty good. It's a little bit bright right there, so not the best. So let's bring that down to 100. And I think that looks a little bit better. It's still a little bit bright from the light on the left, so let's bring that one down to 2000. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. Now, as for this surface right here, we would like to make that surface gray. So gray 3 is going to be an interesting kind of gray, because we've got to make this look interesting. Kind of like that. That's interesting actually. That's a really interesting gray. And as for gray 1 for our tile, we can actually bring this, change that a little bit. But yes, that looks better. As for the electrical pole, those can be brown. So let's create brown 1. That would be a light kind of brown that I'm going for, to be honest. That does look pretty good. Let's make it a little bit darker. That's near perfect. And as for these ones, it's the same thing. So as for the telephone wires, we can actually increase the offset. So let's increase these depths by 1, and the colors, I think we'd like to go with black 1, or perhaps we should go with something completely darker, like full black, and obviously no roughness. So yeah, I think that could work. So let's call this new material black 3. There we go. I think that works. So same thing with these. Increase the depth by 1, and that's the bezel depth. And the color, let's say that's a black 3. It's very glossy, like a telephone wire, you know. So that's the look I'd like to go for, and I think it personally would look better. So let's delete these ones on the right hand side, and now let's get the ones on the left hand side. Duplicate, bring them across on the y-axis, and extend them along the y-axis. There we go, and save. I think we can perhaps make the telephone poles a little bit darker brown. There we go. That's better. And there we go. These little things that I designed and put on top, those can be black 3 as well, because they're glossy. I think that works quite nice. So let's change all of those one by one. And it's the same thing with these ones within the middle. Let's change these to black 3 as well. I think it's looking good so far. And as for these at the end, let's change these as well. That was a mistake. Black 3, there we go. Very nice. So how is our town looking? It's looking good. Just one more thing. Telephone poles, they need to be brown. Let's change these to brown. That's an easy job. There we go, and save that. That looks good. I think what we have so far looks pretty neat. Really nice indeed. And as for the light box, this should be black. Perhaps black 1. And as for the box, that needs to be black 1 as well. There we go. So now, next up is this building, our first building. Let's see what we can do. And I would actually say the chimney color can be gray. Perhaps like gray 3, yeah. And the chimney pipes can be black 1. Same thing with the secondary chimney, gray 3. There we go. I think that's looking good so far. Now for the first color, I'm thinking a creamish kind of color. So new material, new color, and let's find a color that looks good. And as for the material, as for these can be brown as well. I'd like these to be brown. That looks pretty nice. Let's set the secondary house ones to brown as well. There we go. Very nice. Now this will be glass. So let's put glass 2. Actually glass 3. And let's change the surface to a glass material. And let's bring that down. And as for the door at the front, I think the door can be brown as well. But of course, perhaps a different kind of brown. So perhaps brown 2, and it doesn't necessarily have to be brown, by the way. It can really be any color. We could set it to baby blue, but I do think that brown in this case does work really lovely. Yes, I think that tends to look really nice. And as for this, I think it's like beige, you know? I think it's like a light brown, so maybe light brown. Let's separate this inner design by color. And I think for this one we can perhaps use brown once again. I think brown 2. So I think brown 2 and assign. To be honest, it could be any color that we choose, to be honest. But if we're going to choose a color, I think it's important that we do stick with that color. So kind of like a pastel purple. We could go with a pastel purple, but we really have to stick with that philosophy to keep it consistent. And let's move our glass back inwards just a little bit. And we can actually turn down the intensity of our glass, or rather turn it upward, depending on what suits you. For some of these, we can also add an emission. So for this glass right here, we could turn it into an emission. So if we go to surface and we choose emission and we assign, that could be quite interesting. So let's see what would happen if we move our glass back. So that's actually quite interesting. So now next up, we would like to edit our Apple Store. So this should be silver 1, like a metallic kind of silver. So let's make this extremely metallic, or perhaps not extremely metallic, but we want to give it that Apple metallic vibe. And as for the top of the roof, that can actually be separated into a different color, and that can actually be black. We can actually assign that, and it actually looks relatively good. Now for the glass, this should be glass 3, and it's the same thing with the door. Actually, the door should be glass as well. Now for the interior, these are all wooden, so these should be brown. So let's change these to brown because it's an Apple Store. Perhaps a light brown. So let's create a new color, and it will be brown, but I'll try to make it as light as possible, kind of like that. So let's call that brown 3, and we will be able to just select brown 3 from here on out. Now as for the Apple Store surface, let's separate this into different material. Let's create a new material. Let's assign. And I think Apple Stores are usually like white, or there's some sort of tile or gray, but it's not metallic, I don't think, and I think the roughness is usually up. So perhaps we can leave it like that. Now as for our glass, let's move this backwards into our Apple Store. Let's make sure that all the legs are properly in the right color, and then let's move this backwards, and let's move it forwards just a little bit. There we go, and save. Now in this Apple Store, we will definitely need a light, because so we can duplicate our light from our lamp pole. Duplicate, carry this along the y-axis, carry it backwards along the x-axis, bring it down on the z-axis, and insert this into our Apple Store. And now we can increase the brightness. Okay, that's probably too bright. Let's bring it backwards a little bit, and let's bring down this color. Now as for the glass, I do kind of want to change the glass. Let's create a new material for the glass. Let's call it glass 4. There we go. Glass 4 definitely looks better, because now things are blurred somewhat, so they look a little bit different. Now as for our first house, let's edit it a little bit more. This back door should be a different material, right? Let's add new material, and I think brown 3 and assign, or perhaps brown 2. Yes, because that's the same thing as the door. So let's move on to coloring our house. So this house would be whitish gray. So far we've gotten blue for the roof, and I think that looks okay so far. So we will go with that color. I'm not sure what that color is. It's almost like extremely light purple, but for some reason it does look good. So this material, basically the roof, we will call this blue 3. Really nice kind of color. We can make it a little bit more purplish, which is even nicer. And as for this, we should put this material into glass actually. So I'd say glass 4 for these material. Yes, certainly. Glass 4. The only thing with this color is that it's not popping. Not the way I want it to. Honestly, at this point, I feel like going with yellow, kind of like that for the house, and possibly for the entire house, and possibly up here we can possibly go with a darker yellow, almost brownish yellow. Yeah, that surprisingly works. Surprisingly works. And as for the glass below, that's glass 3. There we go. That's quite fantastic. I'm still having problems with this first color, and I think the original probably would work best. And I do believe the original was light brown, sort of like a beige-ish kind of brown. Now that does look somewhat better, I would say. Now, how about our big building? Well, let's go on to our ATM first, of course. So as for the ATM, majority of this ATM is perhaps white or grayish. I'm not 100% sure, but we can see. Now for the scream, I really want this to be emission and kind of like a bluish emission, because it being a screen, kind of want to show a bit of blue light kind of bleeding out. And as for this little gap at the top right there, that I do believe we separated. There we go. This will be purple as well. But I don't think that purple is showing as well as I'd like it to. So let's tab in. Let's click 1 in our number pad. And perhaps what we need to do is to bring this part downwards. And for this gap, we can actually bring this downward as well. So let's click on set origin to geometry, and let's scale this along the z-axis. There we go. We can scale it along the z-axis. That's looking somewhat better. So that is looking good. Now for our building, no idea what we'll set this one to, but perhaps a blue color, which seems absurd because this is one of the most interesting things, choosing colors. So let's say blue 7, and what do you know? The first color is kind of perfect. I'm not so sure if this is necessary at the top. We can probably get rid of that one. And yeah, we can get rid of it. It's a bit unnecessary. So these two panels are of course glass. So let's set these to glass 4. And it's the same thing with these glass at the front. Set these to glass 4 as well. So there we go. I think that does look somewhat better. And perhaps a darker blue for the balcony. So blue 8, let's call this one blue 8, and want this to be a darker blue but not. So I think that looks pretty good. Kind of. It's getting there for sure. So what we need now is blue 8. Let's create a new glass material. Call this one glass 5. We will use this for our Apple Store. Let's go to surface and let's get our glass material. And this is quite similar to the other glass material. It's just a lot clearer because I'd like to use these glass materials a little bit separated. So I'd like the ability to essentially make these glass materials a little bit darker or lighter if I prefer. And I think that's probably our little city. That's probably our little town. But for some reason, the first house just doesn't fit very well. And I'm thinking perhaps we need to go a little bit different. Perhaps like that. Like dark. Well, that's actually not that dark for orange. That actually looks pretty good. Now, as for lighting, do you need lighting for these buildings? You could try. So let's duplicate this lamppost lighting. And let's bring these along to the apartment building. Let's rotate this lighting. Let's rotate it by 90 degrees and take it inwards into the buildings. And let's rotate it by Let's rotate it upwards a little bit and let's scale this outwards. So now we've got that and we've got glass, but we can obviously change this emission to almost anything we'd like. And let's duplicate these lights. This is an option. If you'd like to keep it, you don't have to, but it's literally just something that I'm trying to see if it makes the design a little bit better overall. So I'm duplicated, and now we'll bring this design a little bit backwards, kind of like that. Duplicate, carry this one upwards, and carry it backwards just a bit like that. There we go. So changing the lighting to make it a little bit orange, it does add an interesting effect. There we go. So that's actually it's actually interesting. So you can experiment with this and see what you'd like. Duplicate once again and bring this along the left hand side to our secondary window. This is at our first house, and of course we will need to bring this forward. There we go. Bring it forward just a little bit. That really does change up the design quite a bit. And let's duplicate once again and let's rotate this towards the left hand side and bring it forward. And this can be for our additional window right there. So we do have a lot of windows. We just want to make sure that every part is considered. So that's actually not too bad. Let's move this upwards, GZ, and move this upwards just a little bit. And what you can do is continue to adjust this design until it fits your particular design, of course. And perhaps scale it down if you need to, and perhaps move it down a little bit. Always got to make sure that these designs, they do pop. I think that actually looks all right. I do think that actually looks all right. Yes, so that's our small city. So I hope you enjoy this course overall. Change it up, make your own type of city, and feel free to share it in our communities page. I'd love to see your progress. I hope you enjoy this. Final thing that we've got to do is obviously render our image. Remember to save your image, Control S to save your file, sorry. And you can start rendering your image. So currently I've got it rendering right there. Just click the rendering button in the top left hand corner, render image, and I've got it currently rendering. So that's lovely. It's going to be interesting to see what this looks like in the end. But I do hope you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.